Tom, a 32-year-old software engineer, had always taken pride in his unconditional love for his parents. Since he was 25, he had been financially supporting them after they lost their savings in the 2008 crisis. One day, he accidentally overheard a video call between his parents and a relative, and his heart shattered when he heard his own father call him a freeloader who thinks he is helping us. Before I continue this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from, and do not forget to subscribe so you never miss authentic family stories. I grew up in a middle-class family in Boston, Massachusetts. My father, Paul, worked as a civil engineer, and my mother, Diana, was an elementary school teacher. On the surface, my childhood seemed normal. My parents worked hard to provide for me, but they also placed immense pressure on me academically. As their only child, they expected me to surpass their own accomplishments. There was always a generational gap between us. My parents never truly understood my passion for technology and programming. While other kids were playing sports or hanging out with friends, I was tinkering with computers, building small programs, and teaching myself coding languages. My father would often walk into my room, see me typing away at the keyboard, and shake his head. He wanted me to become a doctor. Despite feeling pressured, I loved and respected my parents deeply. They had sacrificed a lot to give me a good education, and I was determined to make them proud, even if it meant pursuing a different path than they had envisioned. During college at MIT, I worked part-time jobs to minimize asking them for money. I waited tables at a local restaurant, worked at the campus tech support desk, and took on freelance programming gigs. My roommates often questioned why I worked so hard when my parents could have helped, but I felt a need to prove my independence. In our family, there was a strong cultural expectation that children should be grateful to their parents and take care of them in their old age. My father would often tell stories about how he supported his own parents, describing it as the natural order of things. The guilt trip was subtle, but effective. When I graduated from MIT with honors, my parents attended the ceremony with stoic faces. Instead of celebrating my summa cum laude in computer science, my mother whispered, "You could have been valedictorian at Harvard Medical School." That night, as we had dinner at an expensive restaurant that I had saved up for months to afford, my father raised his glass in a half-hearted toast. "Well, at least you finished college. Maybe this computer thing will work out until you come to your senses." I smiled through the disappointment, telling myself that one day they would understand my choices. One day they would be proud of the path I had chosen. In 2008, the financial crisis hit my family hard. My parents, then in their mid-50s, lost almost all their retirement savings. The investment portfolio they had carefully built over decades crumbled in a matter of months. They were forced to sell our family home, the house where I had grown up, and downsize to a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. I had just graduated and started my career at a promising software company in San Francisco. My starting salary was decent for an entry-level position, but the cost of living in the Bay Area was astronomical. Still, when I learned about my parents' financial struggles, I did not hesitate to help. My first job was at Blue Sync Technologies, a growing startup developing cloud computing solutions. The work environment was intense. 50-hour weeks were the norm, not the exception. I shared a cramped, two-bedroom apartment with 3 other young professionals, all of us trying to save money while building our careers. My desk was squeezed into the corner of our living room, doubling as my workspace and dining table. When I called my parents to offer financial assistance, they initially refused. My father, always proud, said he would rather work until he was 80 than take handouts. My mother was more practical but hesitant. Eventually, after several difficult conversations, they agreed to accept what they called a temporary loan until they got back on their feet. I began sending them $1,000 monthly from my $4,000 salary. After taxes and the exorbitant San Francisco rent, this left me with barely enough to cover my own expenses. I started packing lunches instead of eating out with colleagues. I sold my car and used public transportation. Weekend activities became limited to free events and hiking trips. Dating was almost out of the question financially, something my coworkers often teased me about. As months turned into years, my support from my parents became regular and expected. When I received a promotion and salary increase, I raised their monthly allowance to $1,500. Instead of gratitude, my father commented that the extra $500 was not much considering the increase in the cost of living. My career continued to progress steadily. By my late 20s, I had become a senior developer with a reputation for solving complex problems. Each promotion and raise should have meant more financial freedom for me, but instead it translated to more support for my parents. They never spoke about repaying the loan. In fact, they stopped referring to it as a loan altogether. What started as helping with essential expenses like rent and utilities expanded to include their cable TV package, smartphone bills, and even vacation funds. When I expressed hesitation about paying for their cruise to Alaska, my mother reminded me that they had paid for my entire childhood and education. How could I deny them a single vacation after decades of hard work? So I agreed dipping into my own vacation fund to sponsor their trip. That year, I took no days off working through holidays to meet project deadlines and save money. Around my 30th birthday, I began noticing subtle but troubling changes in my parents' attitudes. Our weekly video calls, once filled with updates about their lives and questions about mine, became dominated by financial discussions. They would detail unexpected expenses, complain about rising costs, and drop hints about items they wanted but could not afford on their own. My plans to purchase my own home kept getting postponed. Every time I saved enough for a down payment, some emergency with my parents would arise. First, it was my father needing dental work not covered by insurance. Then it was their car requiring major repairs. Later, it was their apartment building being sold, forcing them to relocate to a more expensive unit. My relationship with my girlfriend Jessica began showing signs of strain. We had been dating for 2 years, and she was patient and understanding about my financial obligations to my parents. But as we discussed our future together, the reality of our situation became a source of tension. One evening, after I had to cancel our weekend getaway because my parents needed money for a new refrigerator, Jessica finally voiced her concerns. "Tom, I love you, and I respect your devotion to your family," she said, sitting across from me at our favorite coffee shop. "But I am worried about our future. If we get married, will we ever be able to buy a home? What about starting our own family? Your parents seem to expect unlimited support without any plan for their own financial independence." I felt defensive but knew she had valid points. "We are their only support system," I explained. "They lost everything in the recession, and they are too old to rebuild their careers now." Jessica looked at me with sympathy mixed with frustration. "I understand that, but they were in their 50s when the recession hit, not their 70s. Many people their age have found ways to adapt. Your mom could still be teaching, and your dad could work as a consultant. Instead, they seem to have retired early on your dime." Her words stung because part of me recognized the truth in them. My parents had indeed stopped seeking employment after I began supporting them despite being young enough to work. "I am trapped between my love for you and my responsibility to them," I admitted. That night I lay awake, thinking about Jessica's words. Was I enabling my parents' dependency rather than truly helping them? My concerns grew when my father complained about their allowance being insufficient, despite it now representing 40% of my take-home pay. No matter how much I gave, it never seemed enough. Their requests became demands, their gratitude replaced by entitlement. My close friend Ryan, who had known me since college, expressed his worries during our monthly basketball game. "Man, I do not mean to overstep, but what your parents are doing is not right," he said as we took a water break. "They are draining you financially and emotionally. You have put your entire life on hold for them." I tried to defend my parents, explaining their difficult circumstances, but even to my own ears the justification sounded weak. Deep down doubt was taking root. Still, I continued to tell myself this was my filial duty, my responsibility, as their only child. The day that changed everything started like any other Saturday. I had decided to surprise my parents with a visit, bringing them a new television as an early anniversary gift. I drove the 2 hours from San Francisco to their apartment in Sacramento, the new TV secured in the back of my borrowed truck. When I arrived at their building, I used the key they had given me years ago. As I approached their door, I heard my father's voice coming from inside. They were on a video call, and I was about to announce my presence when I heard my name mentioned. "Tom thinks he is helping us, but really he is the biggest freeloader," my father said with a laugh that sent chills down my spine. "He believes every sob story we tell him." I froze in the hallway, the gift bag with the TV remote control dangling from my paralyzed fingers. "Paul, keep your voice down," my mother cautioned, though she was chuckling too. "But seriously, Jackson, She continued addressing whoever was on the call. We have never had it so good. We tell him we need money for medical bills, and then we book a weekend in Vegas. My father chimed in again. The kid is so gullible. All those expensive degrees, and he cannot see what is right in front of him. Remember when we told him we needed money for roof repairs? We spent it on that cruise instead. The person on the call, who I now recognized as my Uncle Jackson, sounded uncomfortable. You think that is a bit much? He has been supporting you for what, 7 years now? My mother scoffed. After all we did for him, he owes us. Besides, he makes good money in tech. This is just a small payback for raising him. Small payback? My uncle questioned. From what you have told me, he has given you over $200,000. Well, he would waste it otherwise, my father replied dismissively. He wanted to buy a house with that girlfriend of his. What a poor investment when he could be taking care of his parents. I stood there, blood pounding in my ears, as they continued to mock me, calling me naive, easily manipulated, a cash cow who would fund their early retirement in style. They laughed about the fake emergencies they had invented, the guilt trips they had orchestrated, and how they had purposely sabotaged my attempts to save money. With trembling hands, I set down the TV I had brought at the end of the hallway and walked into their apartment, pushing the door open without knocking. The look on their faces when they saw me standing there was something I will never forget, a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and most disturbingly, not a hint of genuine remorse. Is it true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Have you been lying to me all this time? My father recovered quickly, ending the call with my uncle, abruptly. You were not supposed to hear that, he said, as if that was the problem. You misunderstood. We were just joking around. I heard everything I said, my shock giving way to anger. You called me a freeloader. You admitted to lying about emergencies. You laughed about manipulating me. My mother tried a different approach, her teacher voice sliding into place. Honey, you do not understand. Parents and children have a special relationship. Everything we have done has been for your own good. For my good, I exploded. How is draining my savings for your gambling trips and cruises for my good? Do not take that tone with us. My father snapped, his embarrassment quickly turning to defensiveness. After everything we have done for you, raising you, educating you, this is how you repay us. By spying and making accusations. I am not spying. I came to bring you an anniversary gift, I said, gesturing toward the hallway. And these are not accusations. I heard you admit everything. What followed was the most heated argument we had ever had. As their deception became undeniable, their strategy shifted. They tried to justify their actions, claiming that as my parents they deserved to be taken care of, that I owed them for my existence. Children have an obligation to support their parents, my father declared. You are just doing your basic duty. If anything, you should be giving us more, considering how successful you have become. I stared at him in disbelief. The man who had taught me about honesty and integrity was now defending years of deliberate deception. My mother, who had always emphasized the importance of hard work, was justifying their lifestyle at my expense. Then came the final blow. I need to see your bank statements, I demanded, suddenly suspicious about where all my money had really gone. After more arguing, my mother reluctantly pulled out a folder from their bedroom. Inside, I found bank statements showing a savings account with over $120,000 accumulated from my contributions, a fund they had never mentioned, while continuing to ask for more. That is it, I said, my decision crystallizing in that moment. I am done. No more money. No more support. You cannot do that, my father shouted, his face reddening. We depend on you. You should have thought of that before you spent years lying to me and mocking me behind my back, I responded, heading for the door. If you walk out that door, you are no longer our son. My mother called after me, her voice shrill with panic. I turned back one last time. I stopped being your son the moment you decided I was nothing but an ATM. The fallout was immediate and ugly. Within days, my parents launched a campaign to paint me as an ungrateful, heartless son who had abandoned them in their time of need. They sent letters to family members, old family friends, even my childhood neighbors, telling a completely distorted version of events. My phone was flooded with messages from relatives, most taking my parents' side without knowing the truth. Only my Aunt Martha, my mother's younger sister, reached out with support. "I have always suspected something was off," she told me during a long phone call. "They have been living far too well for people who claim to be struggling. Your mother even bragged to me about their investments last Christmas, then quickly changed the subject when she realized what she had revealed." Aunt Martha confirmed what I had begun to suspect, that my parents had exaggerated their financial hardship from the beginning. While they had indeed lost money in the recession, they had recovered much of it through an insurance settlement they had never disclosed to me. Their need for support had been greatly exaggerated, then extended indefinitely once they realized how willing I was to help. With this confirmation, I made the hardest decision of my life. I sent my parents a final email explaining that I was cutting off all contact until they could acknowledge their deception and make genuine amends. I blocked their numbers, filtered their emails, and instructed security at my workplace not to allow them entry. It was the most painful but necessary boundary I had ever set. The weeks following my decision were some of the most difficult of my life. I cycled through emotions: guilt, doubt, anger, grief. Had I overreacted? Was I the villain my parents were painting me to be? Should family ties transcend even deliberate, calculated deception? Jessica was my rock during this period. When doubts crept in, she reminded me of what I had heard with my own ears. "This is not about you failing as a son," she assured me. "This is about them failing as parents. They betrayed your trust in the most fundamental way." Seeking more support, I joined an online group for adult children of manipulative parents. Hearing others' stories helped me realize I was not alone. Many members had experienced similar exploitation, disguised as parental expectation. I also began working with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Dr. Winters helped me understand the difference between healthy family interdependence and toxic obligation. "Your parents weaponized your love for them," he explained. "They counted on your guilt and sense of duty to override any questions or boundaries you might set." Through these sessions, I began to unravel the patterns that had been established throughout my childhood: subtle manipulations, conditional love based on achievement, and the constant reminder of all they had sacrificed for me. As I processed these realizations, Jessica and I were finally able to plan our future together. We found a modest starter home within our budget, and I proposed to her on the day we signed the mortgage papers. The ring was smaller than I once dreamed of giving her, but its significance was immeasurable. It represented freedom from financial manipulation and the beginning of our life together on our terms. New friendships blossomed during this period. Ryan introduced me to his weekly basketball group, where I met other young professionals who became true friends. Unlike my parents, they celebrated my successes without expecting to benefit from them. They offered support without strings attached. My parents, meanwhile, were not accepting their loss of control gracefully. They sent letters to my home address, which Jessica would screen for me. They mailed small gifts with guilt-inducing notes. Once my father even showed up at my workplace, causing such a scene that security had to escort him out. Each time I maintained my boundary. I was not being cruel or punishing them. I was protecting myself from further exploitation and emotional damage. A year after our confrontation, I received a letter from my mother that was different from the others. For the first time, she acknowledged their behavior without excuses. She wrote that my father still felt justified in his actions, but she had begun to recognize the damage they had caused. The apology seemed genuine, but I remained cautious. Words were easy, manipulation had been their specialty. I responded with a brief email, acknowledging her apology, but explaining that trust once broken so thoroughly takes significant time and evidence to rebuild. I was not ready for contact yet, but I appreciated her taking the first step toward honesty. 2 years after cutting ties with my parents, my life had transformed. Jessica and I were married in a small ceremony with our closest friends. We had settled into our home-built careers we enjoyed, and were expecting our first child. The financial freedom from no longer supporting my parents allowed us to build a modest emergency fund and even start saving for our baby future. I had created a chosen family from the supportive people in my life. Aunt Martha became a regular visitor, filling the role of family elder with warmth and genuine affection. My friend circle expanded to include couples in similar life stages. We celebrated holidays together, creating new traditions that were free from manipulation and expectation. Through therapy and reflection, I learned crucial lessons about authentic love and healthy boundaries. Real love does not demand unsustainable sacrifice or one-sided giving. It does not manipulate or exploit. Love, in its healthiest form, uplifts both parties and respects boundaries. One Saturday morning, I unexpectedly encountered my father at a local shopping center. He looked much older, somewhat disheveled, and was using a cane. Our eyes met across the food court, and for a moment, I felt a surge of the old guilt and obligation. But then I remembered the laughter in his voice as he called me a freeloader while spending my hard-earned money. I nodded in acknowledgement but did not approach him. I felt compassion for his evident struggles but remained committed to the boundaries that had restored peace to my life. Walking away, I realized I no longer carried the weight of unresolved anger. Instead, I felt a calm certainty that I had made the right choice for myself and my new family. In sharing my story anonymously on support forums, I have helped others recognize similar patterns in their own relationships. The most common response I receive is, "Thank you for giving me permission to prioritize my own well-being." So many of us are conditioned to believe that family obligation trumps all other concerns, even when that obligation becomes destructive. The most profound lesson I have learned is this: healthy love always includes respect, honesty, and reciprocity. When those elements are missing, what remains is not love, but control disguised as care. Setting boundaries is not an act of disrespect. It is an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone involved. As I prepare to become a parent myself, I am committed to breaking this cycle. My child will know unconditional love that empowers rather than constrains, that builds up rather than diminishes. They will learn that family relationships, like all relationships, must be built on mutual respect and genuine care. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? What helped you recognize? When support became exploitation, share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more authentic stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to establish healthy boundaries.